So guys, today we are going to discuss, right, one of the important concept, that is middleware component. So we will discuss what is middleware component, what are the different ways to register middleware components, right? What is the different, right? I mean, what exactly, right? Why we need middleware component? What are the things we can achieve using middleware components, right? What is the request processing pipeline? All these things we are going to discuss in today's session. So let us start, right, discussing what is the meaning of ASP.NET Core middleware component. Guys, remember, right? So these middleware components are basically the basic building block of a ASP.NET Core application. So basic building block of a ASP.NET Core application means what? Means so these middleware components are going to represent, or these are going to decide the request processing pipeline of an ASP.NET Core application. Sir, what do you mean by request processing pipeline? So basically, this middleware component are the basic building block of request processing pipeline. Then what do you mean by request processing pipeline? So request processing pipeline means what? Right? They will decide. Right. So here we need to understand why we are using middleware component. Middleware components are basically used to configure the request processing pipeline. So middleware component means what? Request processing pipeline. Request processing pipeline. Sir, what do you mean by request processing pipeline? So request processing pipeline means what? Means they are going to determine how the incoming HTTP request is going to be handled and the response is going to be generated. So this means what? Means how the incoming HTTP request, how the incoming HTTP request is going to be processed by the application. Clear? So what do you mean by middleware component? Middleware component are the basic building block of a ASP.NET Core request processing pipeline. Then what do you mean by request processing pipeline? The request processing pipeline in an ASP.NET Core application determines how the incoming HTTP request is going to be handled and processed by the application. Is that clear?
Yeah,
Right. So using this request processing pipeline, see guys, remember, whenever I'm going to use the term request processing pipeline, you need to understand this is middleware component. If I'm saying middleware component, you need to consider this middleware component is basically going to register the request processing pipeline. I mean, what are the different functionality, or what are the different features, right? You want to achieve. For that, for each feature, you need to register a middleware component. So what are the things you can achieve using this middleware component? So using this middleware components, right, we can configure authorization, first of all, authentication. So if your application requires some kind of authentication, right, so that if the user doesn't, a valid user, if the whatever the token user is sending, if that is an invalid token, right, for that purpose we can create a middleware component. We can also use of authorizations, right? We can also one middleware, right, which we can create for the authorization. Authorization means whether the user has permission to access a particular resource or not. So that is nothing but authorization. For that purpose, we can also create one middleware component. We can create one middleware component for logging. We can create one middleware component for You can consider caching, right? You can create one middleware component for exception handling. If any unhandled exception is there, right, in your application, for that purpose, you can create one middleware component which is going to handle the exception globally. You can create any routing middleware component. So the routing middleware component is going to decide which action method of which controller is going to be execute. You can also create any custom middleware component as per your custom logic. So basically, right, so in your application, so you can consider a .NET Core application is nothing but it is a collection of middleware component where each middleware component is going to perform a specific task. So if I'm using authentication middleware component means it is only responsibility is authentication. It should not do any other things, right? The authentication middleware means it should do it should have the responsibility called authentication. It should not have any other right responsibility. Authorization means it should validate whether the user has permission to access a given resource or not. Logging means only logging, whatever the request flow, right? How the request is being handled by the application. If you want to maintain a proper flow, right? Right, for that purpose, you can make use of logging. Not only that, but also if any exception is occurring, any right, what I can say, any warning is occurring, your application is down, some method is taking more time, right? For the diagnostic purpose, for the debugging purpose, right? You can make use of logging. Caching basically, it is basically used to improve the performance of your application. We'll discuss, guys. Remember, whatever I'm saying here, authentication, authorization, logging, caching, all these things we are going to discuss in their respective chapter, right? But here you should understand that these are one middleware component which you can register into the request processing pipeline, and this middleware component is going to determine how the request is going to be handled by the system. Similarly, exception handling, we can create a middleware component, right, which is going to right whenever you are running the application, suppose one method you have written where you have not implemented the try catch block, you have written the code in a way that is going to be through some kind of a exception. That means you can consider that is one unhandled exception. So you can also create one middleware component, right, globally, which is going to handle any unhandled exception, right, that is occurred during the execution of your application. Routing basically, right, if you are developing the application controller base, right, where you have to create one controller, within that controller you are going to create multiple action method, and then this routing middleware component is basically going to be used in that scenario where based on the URL pattern, right? HTTP method type, URL pattern, request data, request body header, right? It is going to decide which action method of which controller is going to handle that request. And any custom middleware component which you want to execute, right? You can also create as part of your request processing pipeline. Clear?
Sir, do you have, I mean, if you wanted to implement this kind of functionality in older versions of .NET, how uh, they used to do that?
So So what is the meaning of right how you are going to implement in older version of right what I can say version of, so you know something called HTTP handler, HTTP modules, filters, right?
Action filter. Okay.
Right? Action filter is something different, right? But yes, you can achieve right creating by some kind of a filter, right? If you want to handle something global, you can right create some kind of HTTP handler, HTTP module, filters, right? They are also there. Action filter even available here, but action filter are basically going to execute before and after the action method execution, right? But in that case, right, you can also create authentication, authorization as some kind of a filtration. But this is completely new, right? These middleware components are not available in older framework, right? If you are using older framework, then you have to use some kind of a, right, they are provided some kind of a different mechanism, right? For authentication, authorization, you have to use authorized attribute. You can implement, right? What I can say, right? Some kind of a custom logic which is going to validate the token, validate the right roles. Based on the roles, it is going to decide whether the user can access the method or not, right? For logging, you have to implement manually, right? Caching, you have to implement manually, right? Wherever you want to store the
Manually
data.
in the sense, manually in the
Manually,
sense,
manually
are
in
we
the
need to
sense,
create one class?
right? Yes, yes. Manual in the sense what, right? This functionality, what it is providing through middleware component, that is not possible in, right, in your ASP.NET Core application. So for that purpose, right, you have to create a method, right, and you have to register that method in the global access file, and you have, and that method is going to execute before, right, whenever the application processing starts. And even right, I don't want to discuss right how these things are are going to happen in your older framework because that is out of the context, right? So what I'm going to discuss, what is available in ASP.NET Core, I'm not going to discuss how these things are going to be right implemented in older framework, and doesn't make any sense, right?
No.
Because
Why
we
I
are
asked you this question is, in recent interviews, so many people are asking this kind of questions. So why
see,
we
why
can
they are asking, let me tell you why they are asking. because you have mentioned that, right, you know ASP.NET MVC and ASP.NET Web API. If you mention that you know ASP.NET MVC and ASP.NET Web API in your resume, definitely they are going to ask a question, right, related to ASP.NET MVC and Web API, right?
Okay.
If you didn't mention that you know ASP.NET MVC and Web API, they're never going to ask this kind of question. So if you specify that you know MVC and Web API of .NET framework, they will definitely ask the question. And if you
Okay.
mention, right, you know ASP.NET MVC and Web API, then you should know how to implement this thing in, right, ASP.NET MVC and Web API. And discussing those concepts, right, it is a waste of time in ASP.NET course system because we are not
Okay, sir.
learning it.
Uh, can you please tell me one simple answer, like how I can answer that question if they can ask like uh, do you have the same
I
features
have
as the
already, I have
ASP?
already answered that answer. You have to use HTTP. Do you know what do you mean by HTTP module, HTTP handlers? Do you have any idea?
Not much.
If you don't know, then right, you cannot understand. Right? Just go
Okay.
ahead and learn what are HTTP modules, what are HTTP handlers, right? And how they are going to implement in a .NET framework application. And right,
Okay.
so what I understand is you do not have some right advanced right advanced knowledge of older framework. That is the reason why you are stuck, right? So if you are going to learn
Yes.
some concept, right, not basic, basic can be covered by anyone. Basic you can learn from here and there, but try to learn the advanced concept, right? Why I'm saying,
Okay.
because if you don't know how to implement identity, if you don't know how to implement JWT authentication, HMAC authentication, right, right, then how you will give the answer, right? And interview preparation, forget about the interview preparation. I never consider, right, interview preparation, right, in my live session. So what I understand, right, prepare interview preparation, you have to prepare by yourself. What my responsibility, how to implement the things, right?
Okay.
Suppose I'm going to explain how to implement a JWT authentication, how to implement a JWT with a refresh token, how exactly it is working in client server architecture. If I'm going to if I'm going to give that picture, right, or you can say, if I'm going to put that clarity on your mind, then interview is just a matter of time, right? Any question they ask, if your basic is clear, if you know how the things are happening behind the scene, you can give the answer very easily. For example,
Yes.
currently, if somebody, right, if any interviewer will ask you some question related to in process hosting, out of process hosting, custom web server, are you able to give the answer?
Yes, sir.
Why? Because you understand the concept, what is happening behind the scene. If you have not clarity, then how will you give the answer, right? So that
Yes, sir.
clarity is more important rather than preparing the interview, right? What I'm saying, why I'm saying, because I have given the answer. So for implementing such kind of things, we need to use HTTP handler, HTTP models, right? And sometimes we are going to use some kind of a filters, right? But you will not get clarity. Why? Because you don't know the behind the scene story, how the things, how HTTP handler, how HTTP models are working. You have no idea. So how you will get the clarity? Clear? So this HTTP
Yes.
handler model, right? So you can consider this middleware components, what we are going to discuss, right? It is the re-implementation of HTTP handlers and models. But in MVC and Web API, implementing HTTP handler and model is little bit difficult, but in MVC, right, in ASP.NET Core, Middleware Component will simplify the things, right? So whatever complexity we achieve in our older .NET Framework application, those complexity they have right simplify up to one level, right? So that you will not find you will not feel that it difficult to implement such concept, right? So whatever I'm saying here, authentication, authorization, logging, caching, exception handling, routing, right? Custom middleware component, right? Everything I'm going to discuss in detail.
Okay, sir.
Clear?
Understood.
Yeah. So now what is the job or what is the role of a middleware component? So what is the role of a middleware component? So this middleware component, right? What exactly they are going to do? They can alone handle the request. Handle the request. First of all, they will handle the request by generating a response. So if we, right, so they can alone handle the request by generating a response, right? They can also call, they can also they can also call the next middleware component registered in the request processing pipeline. They can also call the next middleware component registered in the request processing pipeline. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Request processing pipeline, short form I have written. For example, authentication middleware first execute. Authentication middleware, after execution, he find that the user is invalid. In that case, do you think that he is going to call the next middleware component?
No.
No,
In that case,
it
he
stops
can
there.
handle the response by generating a right. He can alone handle the request by generating a response. Now once the authentication middleware execute and he see that the user is valid, then the authorization middleware will going to execute yes or no.
Yeah, pass to the next one. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
In that case, so what exactly a middleware can do? A middleware can alone handle the request by generating a response. Middleware can call the next middleware component that is registered in the request processing pipeline. So here, if this middleware component are registered in this sequence, let's assume this is middleware 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, this is 6, this is 7. The execution is also going to be in the same manner. First this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. So registering the middleware component in a proper manner is very, very important. If you put them in a wrong manner or wrong order, your output is going to be misbehaved. You will not get the appropriate output. Yes, some of the middleware are there. They are not going to become picture each and every time. For example, this exception handling middleware is there, which is never going to come into the picture if there is no unhandled exception. So exception means what? It is one exception which might become or might not become, right? If you are having some unhandled exception, this middleware component will come into the picture. If there is no unhandled exception, then this middleware will not come into the picture, right? So what a middleware component can do is he can handle the request by generating a response. A middleware component can also call the next middleware component registered in the request processing pipeline. Another point what I need to make sure is middleware middleware can have access to the incoming HTTP request and outgoing HTTP response. So what exactly it means? For example, when I execute this middleware, then it will
Sir, I
call
have
this
one
middleware.
question.
Yes.
Sir, actually, how to figure out that order actually? Let's say we have a
I'm going
complex
to tell you.
application.
I'm going to tell
Okay,
you what is the order, right?
okay,
In
sure,
which order,
sure.
right? The middleware should execute, right? So because right after this one, I'm going to discuss middleware component request processing pipeline. What is the best order as per Microsoft? I'm going to tell you. Don't worry, right? So here, uh, middleware can have access to HTTP request and HTTP outgoing HTTP response. What exactly it means? See, in this case, so if I'm registering this middleware, when the incoming request is processed, first this middleware execute, then this one, 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 then this one. Once this middleware component execute, then again request is handled, then the response is generated. Let assume this middleware generated the response, and from here we need to return. Then from this one, the it will return to this one. From here, it will return to this one. So a middleware component, what exactly it can do, right? Right? It can process some part of the request. It can process some part of the request, can call the next middleware component, can call the next middleware component, can handle the outgoing response. Can handle the outgoing response. For example, so this logging middleware component, when we reach at this point of time, we need to log when the request is started. Once we log when the request is started, we'll proceed further. And when the response is generated, from here we return to here, from here we return to here, From here we return to here, and when we return to the previous, which is in this case logging, again we can write when the response is generated. That means when the request is started, when the response is generated, that is the request is completed, that part we can log. That means each middleware component can have access to both HTTP request object as well as HTTP response object. Request object means whatever the data client is sending, that what a middleware component can access. Response object means once the response is generated by any of the middleware component, and if any of other middleware component they want to modify the response, they want to add some kind of a custom header, right? They want to do any kind of things, right? If they want to manipulate the HTTP response, they can do this thing. That means they can have access to both HTTP request as well as both HTTP responses. Clear?
Yep.
Right? So how to register the middleware component?
Fourth
How to
point should be outgoing response, correct?
Sorry?
The fourth point
Sorry,
should be outgoing response.
Sorry, this is outgoing response. So whenever I'm saying incoming, this is request. We unmute the video, guys. I'm saying again and again, please give me respect, right? Don't unmute your video. So this is outgoing response. So whenever I'm saying incoming means request, outgoing means response, right? So how to register? So to register the middleware component, what we need to do, we need to use web application instance, which is going to be provided by the program class. So using this web application instance, right, we can make use of a map method. We can make use of a get map method. We can make use of a use method, and we can make use of a run method. So these are extension method. Using this extension method, we can register the middleware components. Clear? How to register, I am going to show you practically. Right? But what method we need to use to register? These are the four methods. What is the difference between a map, get map, use, run? All these things are practically I'm going to show you. Clear?
And their web application instance.
Yes.
Map,
So
get map.
web application instance means what is that? This one. So this is my web application builder instance, and this is my web application instance. So using this app method or app variable, we are going to register. Clear?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Right? So this is the basic concept. Now let us try to understand, how it is going to do. It's a by default, right? Whenever we create a ASP.NET Core empty project, you can see currently, you can tell me how many middleware components are registered. By looking at this code, can anybody tell me how many middleware components are registered?
One,
Two.
two.
Two are
So,
there.
so one is using map, another one is using run extension method, right? So now this is one middleware component, and this middleware component is going to handle the request. I mean the root URL. Right now, if I run the application, this is the middleware component which is going to handle the request. Guys, one more thing I need to tell you is there are many built-in middleware components are available. We are going to discuss many built-in middleware components. We are also going to create custom middleware component, everything, right? With real-time examples I'm going to discuss. But in today's session, what I'm going to discuss is the basic concept of a middleware component, right? What is middleware component we have discussed, how to register, what are the difference between all these methods, and what is the request processing pipeline. That is what we are going to discuss. So all these things, authentication, authorization, logging, caching, exception handling, routing, right? Once time comes, I'm going to discuss. Clear?
Yes, Pranay.
Yes.
I don't know who is there, right?
Excuse me?
And I
Hello.
don't know
Excuse me?
who is right. Unmute the video again and again. See, if I see again, then I will completely remove him from this session. Right? I'm very strict, right? When the sessions are going on, I don't want to disturb myself. I don't want anyone to disturb by looking at your picture. Clear?
Excuse me?
Yes.
So it means if I say app.use, so I'm registering the middleware also, app.use.
So why you are thinking too much about the after the use? I'm saying I'm going to discuss what is the use of these three, four methods in detail. I may say anything
Okay,
you
okay.
want to use, run,
Nah,
get
okay.
me map. Right? Don't think too
That's
much
fine.
more.
That's fine.
Right? So whatever I have explained till now, if you have any question, then you can ask. Right? Whatever
Okay.
concept
Thank you.
I have
It's
not
clear.
yet discussed, right? Don't ask me anything. I'm going to definitely
Uh,
right discuss this thing. Clear?
Okay.
so I have a question.
Yes.
From these four instances, we can use one of them or all at a time.
See, I'm going to show you now. You can use run map, get map, right? So these two are basically used for minimal API. So what is minimal API? How to use them, right? I have a separate session. I'm going to show you how to use this, and these two are you can use. So each one having a different purpose. How to use them? Can I use a combination of all these things? I'm going to show you, right? Till now I have not yet discussed map, get map, use and run, right? And discussing this thing, can we use all these things one by one, right? I'm going to show all these things practically, and whatever your question, right, definitely I'm going to cover at some point of time. So what I'm asking, so anyone having any question, what is middleware component? What are the things we can achieve using middleware component, right? What exactly a middleware component is going to be, right, going to do? Anyone having any question, they can ask, right? How to use this four method? What is the use of this four method? When to use this method? I'm going to discuss in some time. Clear?
Yes, I have one question.
Yes.
Let's say if we have two middleware like authentication and authorization. If the request is failed, the authentication will make a response.
Yes, definitely it is going to return that. So you know what, if the authentication is failed, type of a response we need to return. If
Uh,
authorization, so do you know what is the status code for authentication? Do you know what is the status code for authorization?
yeah,
So
I think it's correct.
so each one having a different status code, and I'm going to discuss this thing right in detail. How to return, right? If authentication is failed, how to return the response? If authorization is failed, how to return this response? Right? All these things I'm going to discuss. I'm not going to discuss right authentication, authorization, logging, caching, all these things right in today's session. So I'm saying these are the things what we can implement. But how to implement?
Yeah.
When time will come, I will going to explain, right? If you look at my session, right? If you look at my syllabus, everything is going to be there. Okay, so you guys are doubting, so let me open the syllabus, right? So whatever I'm right providing, right? Let us go ahead and see whether these things are available or not, right? So action
That's okay,
result,
sir. That's okay.
right? So everything is there, right? So you can see, right? Routing, right? I'm saying routing, so routing is there. I'm going to discuss how to use routing middleware components, right? Then data annotation, fluent API, state management, crowd operation. So filter is there, right? How to use filter, I'm going to discuss, right? Then right, I'm going to discuss this is identity, right? So here I'm going to discuss what is authentication, what is authorization, right? All these things I'm going to discuss, right? Then right, you are talking about right that 401, what is the use of 401, 403, right? All these 404, right? All these things I'm going to discuss, right? Then I'm going to discuss this logging is there, right? I'm going to discuss logging. I'm going to discuss caching, right? Whatever you are talking about authentication, authorization, everything is there. I'm going to discuss in the respective chapter. Why? Because if I'm going to discuss authentication and authorization today, you will not understand anything, right? So because we do not have any basic thing, right, about right ASP.NET Core, and it doesn't make any sense to start the advanced concept. So once time will come, I will explain. So what I'm discussing today, please keep focused right on the basic concept of a middleware component. So what currently we are learning, ASP.NET Core basic concept. Once ASP.NET Core basic concept is completed, right, then I will start developing MVC application, web API application, and other kind of things, right? So let us try to understand, right, how the things are happening. Let's assume we have developed one application. where we have right, where we have configured three different middleware component. One is logging middleware component, one is static files middleware component, and another one is MVC middleware component. Right. So this MVC means you can consider a controller action method. Right. So when the request comes to the application, then this is the first component registered into the request processing pipeline. So this middleware component is going to be executed and it log when the request is started. After this middleware component, he will send the request to the next middleware component, which is registered into the application. And in this case, this middleware component can decide whether he can handle the request alone or he can send the request to the next middleware component. For example, if the client requests for some static files like some CSS file, some HTML file, some JavaScript file, then in that case, this middleware component can alone generate the response, and from here he will return the response back to the previous middleware component. If the middleware component is not calling the next middleware component, then in this case, we can call this concept as short circuiting. So when the middleware component doesn't call the next middleware component, so this means what? It is short circuiting the middleware component execution, and from here it will return the response to the previous middleware component, which is logging. Again, whatever the response is returned by this middleware component, that response if we need, then this middleware component can modify. For example, the request is not for the static file, the request is for the action method, right? Then in that case, what will happen? This middleware component will call this one. So he is unable to handle the request because he can only serve the static file. So what this middleware component will do, he will transfer the request to the next middleware component, that is the MVC middleware component. Now the MVC middleware component will execute the respective action method of the respective controller, which is going to generate the response. Once the response is generated, he will return the response back to the previous middleware component. Previous middleware component will return that response back to the logging middleware component, and this logging middleware component will return the response to the client who initially made the request. Clear? Yes, sir.
Pranay, can you
Yes,
explain me
sir.
one more time?
So what thing you will not understand? Please ask me. Explaining one more time doesn't make any sense. So you just tell me which part you are not understanding.
I mean, like, how can we get response from one middleware component to another component? Why? Because
Because
that if yeah, in logging middleware component only it get fails, then it will
if
generate
see, you just
automatically.
tell me if this middleware get failed, then how you will call the next middleware component? Failed means what? Some error is occurred, right? If error is occurred, then no other things is going to be happening, right? So you have to see, right? Whenever you are writing a middleware component means practically, if you think these are method. So if you are writing one method, right, then from that method, is it possible to call the another method?
No,
If you are creating one method, from that method, can you write the logic which is going to call another method? Is it possible?
no, no.
Why no? So you have some basic C# knowledge or not? Suppose I'm creating one method, right? Suppose I'm going to create one public, static, some void, right? Some void method one. So this is method one, right? So inside this method one, I have written some logic, right? That's fine. Right? So here I have written another method, and here I have written another method, right? So from this method, can I call method 2? Is there any problem?
No,
From method 2,
No
can I
problem,
call
sir.
method 3?
Yes, but okay.
So from method 3, can I call method 4?
Yes,
Right? So is it possible or not?
possible, sir.
Then why you said no? So from a method, I can call method. So here, can I write some console.writeLine statement before calling the method? Can I write some statement after calling the method? Can I write some statement here and here also? Yes or no? Let's assume this is a logging method, right? Logging right? Let assume this is static files. Let assume this is MVC. So from here, can I call the static files? From here, can I call the MVC middleware components? And let assume from MVC, we handle the request. Now, so whatever I have explained here, right, the same thing I have presented here. Now from this statement, you have written one logic. If one, right, suppose I'm getting some value here, if integer, right, some number, and here I have written, right, I'm passing, right, some value 1. Here I have written if norm equals to 1, right, then I have to return from here. So in that case, right, you just tell me, so in this case, if I'm passing 1, is it going to call the MVC middleware component? Yes or no?
Yes,
No.
yes, no. I
How
mean,
how it is going to call yes? Still, just use your common sense, man. So here I'm passing 1. If 1 equals to 1 means condition true. True means I'm
It
returning.
will
Return
return.
means the statement is
oh,
going to execute or not.
Oh,
no,
it will
Pranay, this
return.
one I understood, but my question is, if the
Yes.
request get failed in logging, so it will not go next to middleware component, right?
So that is what I'm asking. So whatever you are talking about, failed means what? Some exception occurred, some conditional logic you are writing, or something else. So here you can consider request failed. Let assume this is the logic which I have written. So here it is making that request failed. Or you want to write the statement directly here in the logging middleware component, right? Suppose I am writing, right, 2 equals to 1. So in this case, the condition is going to be failed. So if failed, then why? So if failed only, from here only, it is going to return. It is not going to call write further middleware components.
Oh, yes, now I understood.
Right, so this is right. So failed means what? So failed means something or unwanted things happening, and right, and you are
Mm.
writing the code, right? You are the developer. So if something is wrong, so what I need to do I need to write a try catch block to handle the exception, or do I need to provide a different way to execute the logic by using retry pattern? So you are the developer, you only decide, right, what I need to do. So what I'm saying, so these middleware components, they are nothing but one method. Inside that method, whatever logic you are going to write, it is up to you. You can decide whether I need to call the next middleware component or not, whether I need to return the response from there only or not. If there is some exception occurring, for example, right, suppose I have declared here integer x equals to, right, what I can say 10, and here y equals to 0, right? And here I am writing integer z equals to x, right, divided by y. So I know this is going to return some kind of a right runtime exception. So if this exception is occurring here, right? So in this case, am I written any try catch block here?
No, otherwise you
No.
crash.
So in this case,
It will
what
be
will happen?
handled.
A runtime exception occurred means your program execution is going to be stopped. Whenever there is an unhandled exception, from that point of time only, your program execution is going to be stopped, and it is going to throw some kind of, right, what I can say, runtime exception,
Okay,
Oh,
Pranay.
right?
I didn't understand means why this middleware is depends on each other. Means why the static file depends on logging.
Right. So no one is depending on anyone. If I remove this thing, no problem. So this middleware is only going to handle the request. So whenever you are creating one application, are you writing everything inside a single method, or you are creating different kind of method and calling those method from another method?
They're creating different methods.
Why you are creating, my question? Why not you put everything inside a single method?
This is widening the principles. Now, why we are means this is not depending on each method. Then why we create giving the burden on one
So
method.
my question,
When
see, you just answer me first my question. If you can put everything inside a single method, then why you are creating different method and calling them from other method? If you are following
Maintaining
that
separate
approach,
concerns.
The
approach
Java
is
complex.
monolithic programming. You know what is the difference between object-oriented programming and monolithic programming,
Yes. Procedure program, you
right?
are asking the procedure programming, no? And oops. Yeah.
Procedure, yeah, procedure is different. Procedure is also again method based. Monolithic programming means everything in a single method, right? And you just tell me what is the job of a logging middleware? Can I write caching statement? Can I write exception handling statement? Can I write routing statement? Can I write any business logic, data access logic, right? Any validation logic inside logging middleware? If I'm putting all these things inside this middleware component, is not it violating the SRP principle, single
Solid
responsibility
principle.
Yes,
principle,
Yeah.
correct. Evaluating.
right?
Violation.
Right. So what I'm saying from the beginning, each middleware component has only one responsibility. We should not put multiple responsibility in a single middleware component. Authentication middleware means what? It is only going to do task that is called authentication, not authorization. Authorization means only authorization. Logging means only logging. Caching means only caching, no other things. Now you understand why we are creating different middleware components?
Yes.
Because each
Got
middleware component going to do only one specific task. For what purpose we are creating that middleware component, that task only it is going to do. Once that task is completed, the rest of the tasks he cannot do. For that purpose we need to call the next middleware component or not. For
Yes.
example, in this example, suppose we are requesting for some CSS, right, right class file, or you can say some JavaScript file, or you can some HTML file. Is this file going to be written by the logging middleware component? Can I put this logic inside this logging middleware component? Is it a good programming practice?
Spaghetti code.
No.
Right? So logging middleware component means what? Only the logging related activity when the request received, when the response returned. That's what I am going to write. Static files means what? So whatever the controller action method is going to do, that is not the job of static files middleware. Static files middleware means what? Any static resource you are requesting, that is going to be written by this middleware component. What is the job of MVC middleware component? Let us assume you define some controller and action method. Those action method are going to be executed here. So each middleware component is having only one responsibility. And when that middleware component execute, that responsibility is going to be executed. If that is what is we are requested for, then he can return from there only. He will not going to call the next middleware component. But what is our main objective? For what, right? For example, if you am sending right employee slash add, right, means if I want to add a new employee, so what is my role? What is the for what purpose I'm sending a request? For my request is create a new employee. Whichever middleware going to create the new employee, from there only it is going to return the response. Whether if you are creating that a new employee here, then from here only you need to return the response. If you are creating the new employee here, then from here you need to return the response. Clear?
Yeah. So in that case, the mirror will directly come to that routing if you means employee slash add. So
Hey,
in that case,
right. I'm asking, right? What do you mean by routing? What do you mean by
routing
routing?
means
You just tell me.
routing means we can define the URL in that config file, and when user hit that URL, that routing will call and like this concept. Yeah,
So
I
this is what
understand.
you understand related to routing, right?
Yes.
That is completely wrong. So first of all, we need to understand what is routing. Then only I'm going to explain what is routing. So you know, right? Routing means, right? For example, you created one controller class, right? Suppose you are creating one home controller, and inside that home controller, you created some action method. Let's say index action method. Let's say details action method, right? So details action method. Now from the URL, you are writing something HTTPS colon slash, right? Colon slash, right? HTTPS localhost, right? and you are providing something called, right, some port number, let's say this one, and here, right, you are providing something like this, right, home/details. So in this case, right, what I understand is, that this is home/index means it is going to invoke the home controller index action method. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. So can you please tell me, in this case, is this a class?
Yeah, this is the control of the class. Yes.
Class, right. So in this case, can you call this as an non-static method? Right. So whatever you
Yes.
define inside the controller action method we are calling, practically they are not non-static method, right?
Hmm.
So you just tell me. So if I want to call a non-static method, what I need? I need to create an instance of this class.
Yes, first of all. Yes.
Where you write this, right, home controller create, right, object initialization statement in your program. Can you right, explain something related to how that controller instance is going to be created? Right? Who created this instance? When created this instance? How it is going to decide that I need to invoke this index action method? I need to invoke this details action method, right? Right. So whatever your little knowledge, right, that is always going to be dangerous. So can you explain this concept now to me? So this is related to routing. Routing doesn't mean that it will map the incoming request to the controller action method. That is right. That is going to be this answer is going to be given by the first year student of your university. But as a developer, as a .NET developer, we need to know how the things are happening behind the scene. Do you know the concept of a reflection? Guys, anybody know the concept of a reflection?
So if you wanted to know the type of it may be a property.
Yes.
So we can
Yes,
create
that
that and
yes, if you want to inspect the metadata of an assembly, you can make use of a reflection. That is one part. But can I create an instance dynamically and invoke the member of that instance using reflection? Is it possible?
yes.
So that is what the framework is using here. So framework, by looking at this URL pattern, where the route table is there, how the data is going to be stored in the route table, what is the right handler is there, right? All these things, right? So right, can anybody tell me the structure of the route table which is going to be created internally to store the route pattern? What do you mean by route pattern? What do you mean by route handler, right? How it is going to, right, where it is going to store the route information, right? And then how it is going to create the controller class based on those route information. Right? All these things are we are going to discuss. Right? And currently we are not understanding the routing concept. Forget about the routing concept, right? Routing concept will come into the picture if you are developing, right, MVC and a web API project. If you are not developing any MVC and web API project, routing will never come into the picture. Without using that MVC, web API and routing, right? We can still develop a web project, web services. We are provided with a minimal API where routing is not available, where controller class action method is not available. But still, what kind of services that controller action method is providing, at the same set of services we can still provide using the concept called minimal API, right? So what I'm explaining middleware component, please focus on the middleware component. Right? Don't give right your brain towards the authentication, authorization, routing, and other related activities. Once time will come, I'm going to definitely explain. Right? That is what I have already shown you. Right? In the syllabus, that we are also going to discuss routing concept in detail. Right? If you look at the MVC and web API, right, we are having something called, right, routing concept. Right, so I don't know, guys. You guys are having some little bit knowledge related to MVC and web API, and by putting that knowledge, right, you are asking something which we are supposed to discuss in our coming session. So what I can tell you at this point of time, forget whatever you learn in MVC and web API, focus on this session, and I will give you guarantee Whatever routing concept you learn in MVC and WebAPI, whatever session, cookies, data passing, and whatever all concept, right? You learn. And whenever I'm going to explain, at that time, please ask me the question. If you are having any question related to routing, when I'm going to discuss routing concept, ask me. If you are having some question related to authentication, authorization, exception handling, whenever I'm going to discuss that corresponding chapter, at that time, please ask me. Currently, we are focusing on the middleware component. And if you guys are going to ask me some question related to how authentication, right, if there is some code we have written, if the authentication is failed, how the things are going to be handled by the system. Without practical, right? Without, see, I generally believed in practical. So I'm going to show this thing practical to you guys. So theoretically, out of 100, right, only 5 to 10 people will understand theoretically. But if I'm going to show the same thing practically, you will get the clarity. And please wait, right? Please wait what I can say at this point of time. Any question related to middleware components, what we discussed, they can ask, right? Something routing, authentication, authorization. If you, what happen if the authentication is failed, right? So those questions, right, you will not understand at this point of time, and I don't want to discuss this question right at this point of time, because if I'm going to discuss, it is going to be a waste of time for other members, right? Any question related to middleware components, I'm going to explain what is the middleware component, how the middleware components is going to be executed, right? How you can register middleware component, all these things I'm going to discuss. The concept which you are asking, this is related to middleware component, no doubt about it. But until and unless those concepts I'm not explaining, it doesn't make any sense to give some explanation, right, about such concepts, right? So what are the different ways to configure the middleware component? As I have already told you, right, we can make use of map get run and use extension method. So let us try to proceed and understand first this map and map get extension method, and then we'll understand run and use extension method. So guys, remember this map and map get extension method, they are specifically used, right, in the case of a minimal API. So minimal API means it is a new way to implement the APIs without using controller action method. Whatever functionality you are providing using controller and action method, the same functionality you can still achieve using minimal API. And again, guys, remember this minimal API, again, we are going to discuss in detail, right? So if you look at my ASP.NET Core Web API syllabus,
Yes,
definitely
sir.
at some point of time, you will find a minimal API, right? So this is minimal API. With minimal API, I'm going to discuss how you can handle error, how you can log, how to implement asynchronous programming, how to work with entity framework, how to implement filter, how to implement authentication, versioning, right? All these things are possible with minimal API, and I'm going to discuss. But for now, what I can do is I'm just going to give you a introduction, right? So basically, using this map and map get method, right? What we can do is we can create a branching. Branching means we can create multiple endpoints, right? And based on the incoming request, right? Based on the incoming HTTP request, right? Whatever the endpoint is matched, right? That endpoint is going to be executed. So in this case, right? If you look at this map method, so this is going to be the partner, and the second one is it is going to be the delegate, right? Which is going to be execute, right? So in this case, if the request is for this pattern, or you can say this URL or this URL or this URL, the corresponding logic, whatever we have written, that is going to be execute. So if I'm accessing the root URL, this part is going to be executed. If I'm accessing this one, right, in the URL, so this is the anonymous method, or you can say delegate, that is going to be executed. If I'm executing this one, so here you can see this name is nothing but a route value. And then in this case, this anonymous method taking that input parameter, and I'm just printing that things, right? So, so the point that you need to remember, map and map get method are basically used to implement minimal API. They allows, right, whatever the controller action method do in our envisioned web API application, the same functionality we can achieve using map get and map method, right? So let me first run this application and see whether I'm able to access these endpoints or not. So and guys, remember again, you can see here to register the endpoint, right? I'm using the web application instance. So whether you registered the middleware component, right, using map, run, map get, right, use, you have to use this web application instance. So now you can see By default, it is accessing the root URL. Now, if you want, right, you can access the other, right? Suppose I'm passing grid product. So in this case, you can see which endpoint is executing. This endpoint is executing. Why? Because whatever the pattern we provided in the URL, that pattern is matched with this right URL pattern what we provided here. So this right handler, or you can say this logic, whatever we have written here, that is going to be execute. Instead of using map get, right, we can also make use of a map method, right? So instead of using map get, we can also make use of a map method, and it is going to work as expected, right? So now if I run the application, then also I'm going to get the output. So here you can see I'm getting the output, and here also I'm also getting the output, right? So these two methods, right, we can use to define the right endpoint, which is going to be executed based on the URL pattern. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Right.
Sir,
So
I
once
have
you
one doubt,
right,
sir.
so using this map and map get, right, we can register the endpoint, you can say, or middleware component, which is going to be executed based on the URL part. So based on the provided URL, whatever the right endpoint or middleware component matched with the incoming URL, that endpoint is going to be right handle the incoming HTTP request. But the question is that, sir, why we have a map if both map and map get are doing the same thing, then which one I need to use, or is there any difference between these two methods? Clear? So now, so the point that you need to remember is that using this map point, right, we can generate method like HTTP post method, we can create HTTP put method, we can create get method, we can create delete method, we can create, right? So we'll see how to do this thing, right, in our coming session. So using map method, right, for example, whenever we are creating some kind of a services, right, we need to decide whether that service is going to access using a get request, using put request, using post request, using delete request, how. So if you want to implement such kind of services, right, using minimal API, then you have to use this map method. And this map get method, it is specifically only for the get request. Clear? So if someone asks you what is the difference between map and map get, then you have to tell map is being used to handle all the different kind of HTTP requests, such as HTTP post request, HTTP put request, HTTP get, as well as a HTTP delete request. On the other hand, map get is specifically designed to handle only the get HTTP request. This is the only difference between these two methods. Using map also, we can achieve get, but this using this map get, we can only achieve get, but we cannot achieve post, put, delete, or anything else. But using map, we can achieve all the different type. We can create, right, all the different types of services which can handle the post request, put request, get request, as well as a delete request. Clear?
Yeah. One question here.
Yes.
So when we use the map get for the first, for post and get, yeah, will we get any error for that?
Sorry.
So when we are using map get for post request,
Mm.
will we get shall we get any
Yeah,
error?
so yes, definitely method not supported, right? Error you will get. This method, what you are accessing, it will not support that post request, put request, right? That error you will get. You can only access this one using the get HTTP request, right? So that is only thing that what you can understand, right?
Got it.
Yes,
Thank you.
right. So this is only right. If you are trying to access this endpoint using right HTTP post request, you will see method not allowed. Mean method not allowed means what? This resource is available in the server, but whatever HTTP method you are using, right, to access that service is not allowed. I'm going to discuss, right? Why I'm not discussing this thing? Because in web API, I'm going to first of all discuss you, right? What are the different HTTP status code, right? So if you look at this in the web API, right, definitely, right, I'm going to discuss how to implement a minimal API and the post put, right, delete, all these things I'm going to discuss. But before that, right, I need to make you understand, right, what are the different HTTP status code, right? Here you can see 405 method not allowed. So what do you mean by method not allowed, right? So this 4xs, right? Can anybody tell me what is the difference between a 4xs status code and a 5xs status code? Can anybody tell me the simple difference between 4xs
Four,
and
four are
5xs?
the error ones, but five are the server related thing,
Yes,
server
yes.
error.
Exactly. So core access error means this error is related to the client request, not to the server. IP access means the error is not related to the client request. It is the issue of the server, right? What are the different status code? What is the use of 400 bad request, 40 on rate authenticated, 405 unauthorized, 404 resource not found, 405 method not allowed, right? All these things we are going to discuss, right? 301, 302, 304, right? Everything, right? Whatever status code are required for us to understand every resource, right? Status code I'm going to discuss by giving some real time right examples. Clear? So these two method is clear, guys.
Yes, sir.
I
Sir, I
I
have
have one
seen
question.
some more
Yes.
methods like map, post, map, put. So for put, post methods, are we need to write like that or?
Yes, yes. Clear?
Oh, okay.
Yes, so this map means a map, port, map, put, something like this we can write. So we'll discuss, right? Currently, I'm not giving. I'm just saying using this map method, we can write, right? Using this map, right? See, if I'm using map post, then what exactly it is? It is similar to map get. Means what? See, map get means only access. It can access. You can access only get request. Map post means it can only access the post request. But using map, right? We can achieve all these things. We can return method with get, post, put, delete, everything. How it is possible, I'm going to show you practically once I discuss the minimal API. Clear?
Yes, sir.
What is the
Sir,
endpoint,
is it
sir?
mandatory?
I didn't get it.
Sorry?
What is meaning of that endpoints? Most of the work in the IT is having on the
Endpoint
endpoint,
means
adding the
what,
endpoint.
right? Endpoint means that you can consider this is one handler which is going to handle the incoming HTTP request. So in this case, you can consider this is the handler, right? So this endpoint means it is a handler, right? And whenever a map, right, whenever you send a request, so you can consider this endpoint. See, term you can use endpoint, you can use right middleware component, you can use handler, anything is fine. So you can consider if you are getting confusion related to endpoint, you can consider this is going to be a middleware component. Clear? So why I'm saying endpoint,
Yes, sir.
that this is going to handle the incoming HTTP request. So the endpoint which is handling the right incoming HTTP request, we can also call them as endpoint. Clear? Right? So just a
Yes, sir.
different terms, right? What I'm using. So here you can see one handler. You can consider this is a middleware component endpoint, right? Anything is fine.
Sir, can I have one doubt, sir?
Yes.
Can I ask one doubt? Sir, in the app method, so we can say like that these are the two arguments there inside
Sorry.
that method, the slash and the anonymous
Obviously,
function can be two
obviously, if you
arguments.
go to the definition, right, map get, right, what I'm saying, right, you can see this is the first parameter. What is exactly it is saying? The pattern, right? The URL pattern, right? What is the second argument? The requested delegate. Delegate means it's a function pointer. So here, if you look at the requested delegate signature, right? So what exactly it is saying? It is a method which is not going to return anything, but it is going to take the context of it. I'm coming to this point, right? What is requested delegate, right? What is the parameter they are taking? What I'm going to discuss. So in this case, this is the first argument, which is nothing but your route pattern or URL pattern. This is going to be your requested delegate, which is going to be executed. Clear?
Excuse me, sir, it works like callback function.
Sorry?
It's a callback function, the app dot
Yes.
post,
Obviously, see,
for
callback
example.
definitely. So when I'm executing this function, right? So callback function means what, right? So what do you mean by delegate? So do you have any basic idea related to delegate?
Sure, sure.
So what
So
I'm asking, what is delegate?
Let case a kind of points to a method, a function pointer to call the
So see,
method.
in this case, right, what I'm saying, right? Okay. So now you just tell me. So in this case, what exactly I'm passing here? One method. Yes or no? That means
First, yeah,
whenever,
method.
yeah. So basically, this is a request delegate. So basically what? Now, whenever we are calling that delegate, right? Then whatever the function this delegate is pointing to, that function is going to be executed. So instead of writing this
Yeah.
statement, what I have written this statement directly, right? So here what I can do is I
Okay,
can make
okay.
this as a task, right? I can make this as a public, right? Async, right? The task of yes. So you have to use this right function. So this is a generic delegate which is going to return this statement. See here instead of writing this statement directly, right? I'm calling this method, right? I can directly write this statement here, which is going to write this right into the response string. So this is what I'm doing here, right? So basically, what you need to do, so you can call a function, right? If that function signature is matched with the signature, right? What this request delegate expect. Otherwise, what you can do, you can call a method, right? You can call one lambda expression. Here you can say this is one anonymous method, which doesn't take any parameter and it is going to return this data. Right? That is what you can do. I'm going to discuss this thing in detail, right? In some time. For now, you
Yeah,
just
thanks.
remember this map and a map get. Map is basically for handling all the HTTP request and a map get is only specific to the get request, right? So what is delegate and all these things I'm going to discuss in some time. Clear?
Yeah,
Sir, is it
thanks.
mandatory
Yes.
to set the map or
See
map
what I'm
get
saying, what I'm saying, I'm just to give you the basic example, right? These things I'm going to discuss in detail when I'm going to discuss the right minimal API. So definitely it is mandatory. First of all, the URL pattern should be there. Without this URL pattern, you cannot access this right delegate. Why? Because once this pattern is matched, then whatever the delegate you provided here, that is going to be executed. If this pattern is matched, then this is going to be executed. So what mandatory you are asking?
I mean, registering this specific URL pattern, like for
So
example, slash or slash
this
home.
is, see what I'm saying, this is just for example. This is not a real-time application. This is just for example. If you don't want, right, remove this thing. No one is going to tell anything. I remove this thing. No, nothing is going to happen. I just give you the example that we are having two method. One is map, right, get. One is map method using which we can right register some middleware component. And this is specifically right mostly going to be used in minimal API. And at when I'm going to discuss minimal API, right, I'm going to show you how you can create a delete, get request, post request, put request, right, patch request, everything by communicating with the database by right implementing asynchronous programming, implementing logging, caching, authentication, authorization, right? All these things I'm going to discuss, right? But now what are these two methods? These are the two methods which we can use to register some of the middleware component. That's what you need to understand at this point of time. Clear?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So now, what is the difference we have discussed, right? Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how you can register, right, middleware component using run extension method. For now, guys, remember, right, it is better to forget this map get and map post. We will discuss these things, right, with real-time examples when we discuss minimal API. Now, what I'm going to show you is another way to implement, right, right, what I can say, middleware component that is run extension method. Right, so here you can see I have registered one middleware components using run extension method, and here I have written something into the output stream, right? So now if I run the application, this is the middleware component that is going to be executed, right? Here we have not provided any URL pattern. Directly, this is the right middleware component which is registered that is going to be executed, right? So now Now we need to understand this middleware component in detail, right? So now if you go to the definition of this run extension method, right, then you will see this is one, right, extension method. Why I'm saying this is an extension method? Can anybody tell me? Because it is a static method
This
present in static
use
class. The first parameter
use the
is
word this.
specified using the this, means it is a extension method. So using this app application builder or app, we are calling this run method. And here, what is the parameter it expects? What is the
Class
parameter
name,
it expects? It
class
expects
name,
one, not a
Delegates,
what is the
delegates,
class. It requires it.
handler.
See, this is the, we are not going to pass the parameter for this thing, right? This is the syntax for creating extension method, right? If you are new to extension method, go and write learn extension method first, because I'm not going to discuss, right, what is extension method, how to create extension method, how to call extension method. This is not part of our ASP.NET course session. You should know this thing, right? So in this case, to this run extension method, I need to pass one request delegate. Now, if you go to the definition of request delegate, then you will see this request delegate signature that it expects some, right, right, it is expecting some parameter of what type,
HTTP
right?
context.
So this is the
Context.
context object, right? That what we need to pass to this request delegate. And this context object gives us access, right? For both incoming HTTP request and outgoing HTTP response. If you see, right, from the beginning, I have told you, right, we can access the incoming HTTP request, as well as we can also, a middleware component can also access the outgoing HTTP response. Why? Because of this context object. So because this context object gives us the flexibility to access the request right, request object as well as the response object, right? So the point that what you need to remember, right, we need to pass a request delegate to the run extension method whose signature must be same as this one. Clear?
Yep.
Right. Now come to this part, right? Now coming to this part, right? We need to understand, right, how this is going to be requested delegate. First of all, you can see this is going to be my anonymous method. See, guys, remember, right? Delegate, you can consider delegated are nothing but your anonymous method, right? So in this case, the first part, so before this lambda operator, whatever we pass, that is going to be the input object, and this is going to be an anonymous method, means method without name. So what I am passing before this lambda operator context. So this context object is nothing but, right, what this delegate is expecting. So this context object we are passing. Clear?
So here we can write this without async and await, right? Those are
Sorry.
like, can we write this without
So what
async
I'm
and await?
explaining, right? So what you are trying to ask, first of all, tell me what I'm explaining. Please focus on that concept. So what is this context object is clear or not? Why I'm passing this context object is clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Why I'm
It
Yeah,
will
passing
for
this
request
handle.
and
context object? Because of
It
the
will
request
handle the
delegate.
request.
The request delegate expect the context object. That is the reason why if I'm not going to pass this context object, the syntax will not match. If the syntax will not match, do you think that the method is going to be executed by the delegate? So delegate concept means what? Whatever the delegate signature, whatever method the delegate is pointing to, that method signature must be same with the delegate signature. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So in this case, the request delegate, what I'm showing here, it is expecting the HTTP context object. That is the reason why, right, I'm passing the context object here. So these things, right, I have simplified, right, in a different way. So this is going to be my, right, what I can say, method. So this is my HTTP context object. Now, using this context object, right, right, what I can do is I can access both request and response. So currently I'm not talking about request because I will discuss that separately, right, when I discuss ASP.NET Core Web API. But for now, we are writing something to the response stream. What statement I have written? Get response from middleware. So this is what it is going to write to the response stream. And using this context object, we can access the response. Similarly, right, if you see, right? Using this context object, we can also access the request, right? So request we can also access. Guys, give me 1 minute. Clear? So this is the requested. So this context object we are passing. Why? Because this run extension method expect one request delegate, and that request delegate is taking the context object, and this is one delegate. Anonymous method are also called as delegate, guys. So this is one anonymous method, and this anonymous method means whatever the input parameter, that what you need to pass before this lambda expression. Clear or not?
So can we go to that context definition, the delegate, request delegate?
Yeah.
Okay. So here we are dynamically passing, right? So instead of context, we can put whatever the name we need. We can, right?
So no. So this is right. So whatever we are passing here, this is going to be context. And for example, if you pass here UNTXT, right, then what you need to do? So this is going to be this one.
Yeah,
Right?
that's what I'm.
Whatever parameter we are passing, the first parameter, automatically this is going to be your context object.
Okay, but for the meaningful name only, we are just.
No, unmute video, guys. Guys, okay, let me remove that guy. It's I'm not going to entertainment testing, guys. I'm saying again and again, please don't unmute your video, and you guys are doing the same thing. Further, if I see this thing, I'm going to remove right him from the right live session. So in this case, this is the context object. Right? Any name you can give, but generally, right, we need to provide the name, right, which should similar to right whatever the parameter is expecting, right. So here context means if we give this name, right, it makes sense, right. Otherwise, whatever name you want, you can give, and but whatever parameter you pass, it will consider that is going to be the right context object. Clear?
Okay.
Right? And here, why I'm using the async keyword? Because this is going to be a task. Task means what? It is a asynchronous method. So asynchronous method means I have to use the async keyword, and here I have to use the await keyword, right? For example, if I remove this thing, right, what will happen? I have to, right? This is not going to be work. Why? It will not work because this request delegate, right, type is task. If it is void, void means synchronous method. Task means it is a asynchronous method. Am I right? So if
Yes,
you are creating one asynchronous method, if you want to return nothing, then you have to provide the return type as a task. At the same time, if it is a synchronous method, you have to write void. So in this case, this is a asynchronous method. So asynchronous method means this anonymous method, what we are creating, that must be a async method, right? So that must be a async method. And here, as you are creating, so and if you guys remember, if I'm creating one async method, within that async method, I have to use the await keyword. Otherwise, that method is going to be behave like a synchronous method. So in this case, you can see what statement I have written here, write async. So write async means it is a synchronous method or asynchronous method. Asynchronous.
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 Synchronous means I can also make use of a await keyword, right? For example, if I'm not using this async method, I can make use of this out, right? But there is no such right method is available. So always it is going to be asynchronous. As asynchronous means writing await is optional here. You should write await keyword. Why? Because whatever the logic it is executing, if it is taking more time, right, the thread is not going to be blocked. So for that purpose, we have to write. So first of all, so we need to create one asynchronous method, asynchronous anonymous method. So instead of saying asynchronous anonymous method, better to tell, right, it is going to be an asynchronous right, anonymous method. And as part of the method body, right, you have to write some asynchronous code. Otherwise, it is going to give you some kind of a warning. And if you are writing some asynchronous code, please make sure to use the await queue. Clear? Right. So now instead of a asynchronous method, right, can I use a named method? Yes, that is also
yes, sir.
possible, right?
Yes.
Let's see how we can do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another static method, right? And in this case, you can see, so whatever the signature I'm providing, the return type is task, taking the context object. Is this signature similar to this request delegate? Return type is task, taking the HTTP context object.
Yep.
So this method, what I'm defining here, is this similar to this delegate signature?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Right? So if this method signature is same, now as part of this method body, whatever you want, right? We are passing the context object. This context object give you access to both request object and response object. Now I want to write something on the response object. So what I need to do, context dot response dot whatever statement or whatever response you want to write, you can write. And then what we need to do is I need to use this first middleware, right? I need to pass this first middleware from here. Clear?
Yeah.
Right? So with these changes, now if I run the application, then also it is going to work. Let me run the application. Am I getting the response? Yes, I'm getting the response. So you can go with the anonymous inline method or you can go with the named method. But what is important? That the method what we are using, whether it is a named method or anonymous method, right? That signature should match with this one. This is important. Should be asynchronous task, should be an asynchronous method. Return type is going to be task and it must take the HTTP context object as a input parameter. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add multiple middleware components, right? So let me go ahead and add multiple middleware components. You can see I'm creating one asynchronous anonymous method here. I'm creating another asynchronous anonymous method here, and here I have written first middleware and second middleware. So now with these changes, right now I run the application and see what output I'm getting. So when I run the application, am I getting only output from the first middleware component? So from here only I'm getting the response. But from here, if I call the next, right, the next middleware, what it is invoking, is this invoking the next middleware component in this case? Yes or no?
No.
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 Why it is not invoking the next middleware component? That's what we need to understand. To understand this, why it is not invoking the next middleware component, we need to go to the definition of this run extension method. And here you can see adds a terminal middleware delegate the application's request processing pipeline. So basically it is saying using run extension method, we can add terminal middleware component. So using run extension method, we can add a terminal middleware component. So what do you mean by terminal middleware component? So a terminal middleware component is a component, or you can say it's a middleware, which is not going to call the next middleware component. It should be the last middleware component in the request processing pipeline. That is the reason why, right, it is not calling now, right? You can see this is the terminal middleware component. So he is never going to call the next middleware component which is registered in the request processing pipeline. Clear? Why it is not calling the next middleware component? Because it is a terminal middleware component. So what is a terminal middleware component? A terminal middleware component is a component which is never going to call the next middleware component which is registered in the request processing pipeline. In this case, this middleware component is registered. This middleware component is registered. Even though this middleware component is registered, this middleware component is never going to call this middleware component because this is a terminal middleware component. So a terminal middleware component means what? It should be the last component in the request processing pipeline. Now you might have one question, sir. How I can call one middleware component from another middleware component? Is this possible? Yes, this is possible. So for that purpose, what I need to do, I need to use extension method. Right? What I need to use? I need to use extension method. Right? Right? So what I am doing here, instead of run, what I'm using now, I'm using the use extension method, right? So in run delegate, in run extension method, you can see it is expecting one request delegate, which is going to handle the request, right? A request delegate means it is a handler which is going to handle the request, right? But in this case, right, if you go to the use extension method, now it is taking two parameter. One is the context object. Definitely, this is the context object using which we can access, right? Using which we can access the, right, what I can say, we can access the input, right, HTTP, what I can say, we can access the HTTP response, HTTP request object. At the same time, it is also taking the next delegate. So what is this next delegate? If you look, right, so in this case, right, it is taking, right, two parameter. One is HTTP context, another one is a request delegate. So here you can see it is taking two parameter, HTTP context and a request delegate. So using this HTTP context, you can access the request and the response. Here you can say I'm writing something to the response. But what is the use of this next? Next means what is next is a request delegate. So as it is a delegate, so what we can do is this the way to call a delegate? Guys, this is how we are calling a delegate or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, either like this or
Or the
invoke
method.
method.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
so
invoke it.
so that invoke, forget about invoke. So directly you can call that delegate, and whichever method that delegate is pointing to. So in this statement, whichever method this delegate is pointing to, that method is going to execute or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
Yes.
this case, so this delegate next method means what? It is so whichever middleware component is registered after this middleware component, that component is going to be executed. So in this case, which component is registered? Run extension method component. So in this case, what will happen? First, this statement is going to be printed. Then it is going to call the next middleware component. So whatever statement we have written, this is going to be printed. So in this case, so both the middleware component should execute. Now let me run the application and show you the output. So getting response from first middle. Okay, so the response is not that pretty good. So what I can do is I can write some slash n here so that we'll get some new line statement. Clear, guys? Now you guys tell me what is the difference between use and run. So using run
So
extension method, can we call it? Can we call the next middleware component?
yes, sir.
No. No.
Yes,
Run you cannot call.
by using use we
You can
can,
call.
but by
So
using
using
run we
use
can't.
extension method, can we call the next middleware component?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So if
Yes.
someone asks you what is the difference between use extension method and run extension method, then you need to tell this thing. So using run extension method, we need to create the terminal middleware component, and that should be the last middleware component in the request processing pipeline. Using use extension method, we can create any number of middleware components, and the use extension method gives us the flexibility, right, which allows us to call the next middleware component registered in the request processing pipeline. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. But
Yes, sir.
excuse me.
Sir, I had a doubt over here.
Yes.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. Earlier we have used app.use and we had mentioned first middleware and again the app.use with a second middleware, and last statement we had the app.run. So we
Okay.
observe that as per.
This is completely different. So this is what is
Okay,
the use of this statement? You just tell me. You
to
attend the
start the
session from day
application.
one. Yes,
Yes, yes,
it
I
is
do.
only going to start the application. This is not a a normal middleware component which is going to handle the incoming request. So so what I have mentioned from the beginning, each middleware component having only one responsibility. What is the responsibility of this middleware component? It is going to start the application
Start the
so that
application.
the application can handle the incoming HTTP request. So don't combine this middleware components, right, with this one. This is completely different.
Okay,
When the application starts, this middleware is going to execute and it will make ready your application so that the application can handle the incoming HTTP request. This is completely
got it.
different and you cannot change it. The rest of the things,
Mhm.
these are the custom middleware component, custom logic you can write. Here you don't have that
Irrespective
flexibility.
of the custom, the last statement should always be app.run to start the web application then.
So it is only going to be executed only one time when the
Huh,
application starts.
yes, starts,
And these are the
correct.
custom middleware component what we created and where we have write our own logic.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
So,
Clear?
sir, we should have always one middleware with app dot run extension method. Line number 21. Always we should have one middleware at least.
Not required. If you don't
Not
want, you
required.
can
Okay.
no
Okay.
issues. Right now, if you run the application, this is the use extension method, right? I can create another right middleware component here. I can write here, this is middleware one, this is middle, right? Second middleware. So this is not required, right? What I'm saying, run extension method means it is going to create a terminal middleware. If that is not your requirement, you can write something like this. Right? After
Okay.
this middleware, there is no further middleware component. So from here, it will return back, right?
Sir, I have one doubt, sir. Sir, after
Yes.
the app dot run middleware, we can't register any other middleware, right? It
So
will
if
not
you
going
write,
to
right,
work.
for example, right, let me do one more thing here, right? Okay, so whatever your question, like, let me come to that part, right? Suppose I have written this statement here. This is my third middleware. So in this case, right, as per your understanding or as per our business logic, right? So this middleware will call this middleware, right?
Right.
But after
Yes.
this middleware, we have again registered this middleware. So does this middleware invoke the next middleware in the request
No.
processing line?
No.
So in this
No.
case, you will get response from this and this. This middleware will never come into the picture in its whole lifetime. Right? So run the application and see this thing. Clear?
Yep.
Yes, from
Yes.
So is this a short circuit some term you were using? Short circuit
Short
something.
yes.
circuit means what, right? If so, whatever the terminal middleware we are creating, that is going to be your short circuit, right?
Okay.
Means what? So from this middleware, it will not invoke the next middleware. Means it is short circuiting the request processing pipeline. Means
Okay.
what? It is not going to invoke further middleware in the request processing pipeline. So the terminal middleware short circuiting, right? The term, right? Different term, but the meaning is going to be same.
So then,
Yeah.
like, what is the difference between this map get and
So
using
there,
this
see,
run
these
and
are,
use?
see what I'm saying. So these are basically used to create, right, customer middleware components. And a map get and right map, what we have discussed, that is completely a different story altogether. Don't mix this huge run with map. So huge run, they are basically going to create custom middleware component. Map is basically going to create, right, what I can say, endpoint routing, you can say, or you can say minimal API, which is going to be a different concept altogether, right? So for creating any custom middleware component, you can go with this approach. If you want to create a minimal API, then you need to go with the map and the map get. But if you are going to use this huge run with map get and a map, it is not going to work. You will not get the response, right, what you supposed to get. Clear?
I have
Okay,
one
yes.
question.
Yes.
How this next delegate is calling the next middleware component? Can we see in the framework?
Right, so you can see this thing, right? So because why? Because this is the right framework, right? So whenever we are writing this statement, this is one middleware registration, this is another middleware registration, this is another
Yeah,
middleware registration or not.
yeah, true.
Yeah. So these are registering into the application processing pipeline. So framework know which one is registered first, which one is registered second, which one is registered third. So whenever it is calling this statement, means whatever the next middleware component, that is coming to the picture,
Yeah,
right? And
that is
but
what I
logic.
wanted to understand.
So what I understand,
Internally,
right?
ho-
So internally the
how
code, right? So you just tell me. So what is this?
this is a one delegate. So
So
with the
delegate.
delegate, some method
See this
must be
delegate.
registered.
See this delegate pointing to this one.
Yeah,
Right, that logic, right, means this is the framework provided things, right? Right, that what I'm not, I cannot show you this thing because these are custom middleware component we have writing, but this delegate is provided by the system. So this syntax what they are providing to us, right? So now if you go to the definition of a use extension method, right, so this is my use extension method, right? So what exactly it is doing here? So whatever the next delegate it is expecting, they have written this logic, right? So what logic they have written? So whatever the next middleware component that is registered in the pipeline, please execute that middleware component and passing
Yeah,
the same
got it.
context object. Clear?
Yeah, got it.
Sir, is there any way to set to you just need to call this middleware when using this middleware? Like, for example, I have write all three middlewares
See, see, the
order.
point about right? So see, that is not possible, right? So whatever the registration in the same order only they are going to be executed. That is the reason why using middleware, right? We are not going to write any business logic.
Okay, okay,
Right? So business logic means we are going to create something called right controller and a action method, right? Where we need to write the proper business logic. But before executing the business logic, right? Whatever the pre-processing things you need to do, like authentication, authorization, right? For those functionality, we are going to use middleware components.
sir. And may I know, like, any real-time example, like on what cases will you call run?
Sir, many real-time examples I'm going to give. Why you are in a hurry? So this is just the introduction class. Was right. Whenever I'm going further, I'm going to give you the real-time scenario of logging, real-time scenario of authentication, authorization, practical implementation, right? Right, then exception handling, routing, right, caching, encryption, decryption, JWT authentication, validation, and all these things only real-time example I'm going to give.
Okay, sir.
I am not giving at this point of time because you will not understand, right? If I'm going to discuss JWT from day one, you will not understand what do you mean by JWT because I have not yet discussed what is the MVC and what is Web API, where we are going to write the code, what is entity framework or how to communicate with the database, what is routing, what are model binding, right? What are data annotation, what are fluent API validation, what is in-memory caching, what is distributed caching. And once we discuss those things, right, then I'm going to discuss this thing. And that is the reason why, right? That is the reason why you guys are going to ask this question right from day one. I know that is the reason why I have provided the detailed course syllabus, right? Whatever I'm saying, just go ahead and check whether this is available in the syllabus or whatever question
Okay,
comes to your mind. Just go ahead and check whether these things right available in the course syllabus or not. Right? See, you guys know something, some basic knowledge you guys have, you know, some basic info, right? You guys are having some basic experience into MVC Web API or ASP.NET Core. You are asking this question. Think about those who are completely new to ASP.NET Core. If I'm going to explain those concepts at this point of time, are they going to understand the concept?
no.
Right? So that is the reason why I have provided the detailed course syllabus. We need to follow the syllabus step by step. We are starting with the very basic concept, and at the end, I'm going to discuss the most advanced concept, right? So, for example, if you guys are interested, right, I will give you one chance, right? Tomorrow I'm going to discuss how to implement Serilog in the morning session. If you guys are interested, those who are interested, ping me. I'll share the right link. You can join the session. At that time, I'm going to discuss, right, how to integrate Serilog, right? How to integrate, right, structured logging, right? How to right, integrate asynchronous logging, how you can implement that rolling functionality. That means once the right file size is greater than this 10 MB or 100 MB, then create a new file. And please keep the last 30 days file, rest of the files are please delete from the folder, right? All these things I'm going to discuss tomorrow. If you guys are interested to learn the advanced concept, ping me in Telegram. I'll ask you to join the session. Right? But those things, right? For your session, we are just starting the batch. We are completely new, right? And you guys are asking this question because you guys know something related to those concepts. But believe me, whatever you are asking, whatever I am providing in the syllabus, all the concept I'm going to explain.
Okay,
Clear,
sir.
guys?
Sir, sir, what do you mean with delegate, sir? Delegate means which is pointing to a function. What it
Right?
exactly means?
Sorry to say, I'm not here to discuss what are delegates. I assume you guys know delegate concept. Because right, this is related to C sharp, and I have already given access to my C sharp sessions. Just to go ahead and learn the delegate if anonymous method, lambda expression, right? All these things, right? So
Yeah,
next,
so explain.
right? So next thing what I'm going to discuss is
Sir,
request.
can I ask one question?
Yes, please.
Sir, app.run method, which we keep at last, can we write this, which starts our web application? Can we write this in starting?
So if you write this at the starting, what will happen? Let's see. So I have written this thing, right? So now run the application. So what happening? So this is the middleware component, right? Which is a terminal middleware component. So from here only the application stops. So no further middleware component are going to be executed. This should and this must be the last statement in the request processing pipeline,
Okay.
right? So otherwise your application will not work. Right, and this thing,
Okay,
right,
got
you
it.
can do right, the R&D you can do also by yourself, right, putting
Mhm.
this in the starting, beginning, middle, right, checking what is happening, right, you can also, right, check these things. Next, what I'm
Sure.
going to do, guys, is, right, I'm going to discuss, right, what are the different middleware components and how you can register them, what is the, right, best approach, right. So you can see, so this is the request means from there when the client send a request, then this is how the middleware components are going to be registered. First, right, if you are, see, all this middleware component, it is not mandatory to use in your application. Whichever component are required, you can put them in this sequence only, right? So this is a exception handler first. Exception handler means what? It should be the first middleware component. Why? Because any exception occurred using any of this middleware component, right, that is going to be handled by this exception. So first of all, you need to, right, register this exception handler. For example, if I use exception handler here, right, before exception handler, if any of this middleware component throws some exception, how that is going to be handled? It will not handle. So the first middleware component that should come in your application is exception handler middleware component. Clear? And why? It is
Yeah.
clear? Yeah. So next one is HSTS middleware component. What exactly this middleware component is saying, right? For example, you develop the application and your application, right? What exactly it wants? It wants that any client, if they are sending the request with the HTTP protocol, that should not be accessed, right? Rather than, right, this HSTS is related to your HTTPS redirection, right? So for example, so you enable this HSTS means what? Means your application should enable to handle the request using HTTPS protocol. If your HTTPS protocol is not enabled, your application is not going to be a work, right? For example, many times you guys can see, right, whenever you are accessing, right, one application, right, that is supposed to be accessed by HTTPS, and if you are trying to access that application using HTTP, you will not get the response. So that is possible because of this HSTS. This HSTS, right, is tell the client, hey, client, please make the request using HTTPS protocol. HTTP is not supported by the application. HTTPS redirection means what? Any request coming to the application using HTTP protocol, that is going to be redirected with HTTPS protocol. Static files middleware means what? Now, any static files that is available on your application, like right, CSS class files, JavaScript files, HTML files, images, right? If you want to serve them directly without executing any kind of custom logic, right, then you have to register the static files middleware. This routing middleware basically going to decide, right? Routing middleware means what? You can consider, this is going to decide which action method of which controller, right, that is going to execute your application code, whether the server, right, whether the application have any, right, what I can say, endpoint defined, right, to handle the incoming HTTP request or not. That is going to be decided by this routing middleware component. After routing, course is enabled, right? For example, you are developing some kind of a web services, right? And that web services going, right, that web services is going to be consumed by different clients. And if you want to make sure a particular client should able to access the resource, that means if you enable to cross origin means, right, wherever you host your application, if you want your application to be accessible by other domain, right, then you need to enable cross particularly, right? Particularly if someone using jQuery Ajax and from their browser they are trying to access your services, in that case you might get CORS issue, right? And if you want to allow or disallow a particular client request, then you need to register this CORS middleware component. After CORS middleware component, this authentication middleware component will come into the picture. What is the use of this authentication middleware? Any request coming to your application, right? Any client or you can say any user, right? If you want to validate whether this is a valid user or it is a valid client, then you have to implement this authentication middleware. And authorization means what? If it is a valid user or valid client, then authorization will come into the picture. And the authorization is going to check whether the user or client has access to access a particular resource or not. If it has access, then it will proceed. Otherwise, it will return the right with some unauthorized error. After the authorization, any customer middleware. So these are whatever the list I have provided here. These are nothing but all are built-in middleware components, right, which you can register directly. For them, you do not need to write any custom logic. Rest of the things, right, they are going to handle. But if you want to create any right custom middleware, you can also create. For logging purpose, you want to create one custom middleware. For compression, right, response compression purpose, you want to create one custom middleware, right? So those middleware you can create here. And after this custom middleware component, the endpoint middleware. So endpoint is nothing but the middleware component, which is actually going to generate the response. It might be a right controller action method. It might be a MVC action method, right? They are going to execute and they are going to generate the response. Once the response is generated, the response is going to be written back in the reverse order, right? The request is going to be executed in the same order. The middleware component are registered in the program.cs class file, and the response is going to be sent back in the reverse order, like from this middleware to this, from this to this to this, and finally it will back to the client. Clear, guys? What is the best order of registering the middleware components? And whatever middleware component I have provided here, starting from exception handler to this endpoint, including the custom and built-in, everything, right? Every middleware components I'm going to discuss in our coming session. Clear?
Sir, order should be means order is very important to we implement this.
Obviously, order is very, very important, right? Order is very, very important, right? Otherwise, you will get issue. So if I put authorization part, then authentication, does it make sense?
No, no.
Right? Suppose I'm going to put this CORS middleware, right? After the custom middleware, does it make sense? If I'm putting routing after authorization, does it make any sense? Right? Why? Because if it is an invalid request, then why I'm going to check a CORS authentication and authorization and executing this custom? So from here only, I can return the response. So in order is very, very important, right? If you want to achieve best performance, best security, and if you want to achieve what is your business requirement. Order is very, very critical, and order is very, very important. Just to put this image right on your mind, and we are going to use this right middleware component very frequently, and at the end, right, you will easily remember this order. Clear, guys?
Yep.
Okay. Now let us understand this right request processing pipeline with one example, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm same example right here, right? What I'm doing, I'm registering few middleware components. So this is a huge middleware component. This is another middleware component registered using use extension method, and this is my terminal middleware component. So this terminal middleware component means what? It cannot call the next middleware component. So what will be the output? By looking at this picture, can anybody tell me what will be the output? So first, this middleware component is going to execute. Yes, this is my first statement. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Then in this case, it is going to call the next middleware component. That means this is my next middleware component. So in this case, this statement is going to my second statement or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Then it is
Yes.
calling the next middleware component. Next middleware component means this one. So this is going to my third middleware component, which is preparing the response, right? So from here, it will
Correct.
come back to this statement. And after coming back to this statement, whatever the remaining statement, right, means whatever the response, right, they are going to execute. So this is going to be my fourth statement. So once this middleware execution completed, then again it will come back to this point, and whatever remaining statement are there, they are going to be executed. So it is going to be the fifth statement. Clear or not?
Sir, suppose we want to set the
Yes. What is your query?
so yesterday you mentioned about the in the app settings, right? Based on the environment, we can skip the features that we don't want to deploy it in the production. So suppose I
Yes.
want to skip any of the middleware component steps
Obviously. So that's something you can do
any
it
of the
here.
environment.
App dot environment dot is production. If the environment is production, then only this middleware component will come into the picture, right? Suppose I'm putting this one, right? Suppose I'm
Yeah.
putting this one. So this will only come into the picture, right? When, right, you are running the application in development, right? Sorry, in the production environment, right? So let me what profile I'm using currently. I'm using HTTPS. So in the HTTPS, right, what is the environment I have set? Okay, let me first put everything in the right development environment. So everything is a development environment. So I'm running the application. Is this middleware component will come into the picture in development environment?
No.
No.
So in this case, what should be the output? First this statement, then this statement, and then this statement, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Run the application and see the output. Clear? Am I getting the output what I supposed to get? Middleware 2 will come into
Yes.
the picture,
Yes.
coming into the picture. No. Why? Because we have written this in production. Now, now, if I write here is development, then will this middleware come into the picture?
Yes.
Right? So run the application and see whether I'm getting the output as expected or not. I'm getting the output as expected.
Got it. Yeah.
Clear, guys? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? So how the request
So
processing is
yeah. So
happening?
one more question. So one more
Yes.
question. So to register the middleware components, we have to write it in this program.cs file only.
Yes. So this is the only place, right? Wherever, whatever the middleware component you need to register. So I have already told you using this web application instance. And this web application instance is only available within the main method. So here only you can register, no other places. There is no
Right.
global.cs
So
class file, no startup class file, only program class file where you need to register all the services and the middleware component. Services we have not yet discussed. Middleware component means within the program class only.
so just like we do it in the ASP.NET, where we set some logging or caching or authentication on application level or session level. So here we do it in this file
You
only.
need to be inside this main method, no other places.
Okay. So there
So
is no
whatever
separate like application session or like application start or session start, just like we do it in.
so why you are asking this question, I don't know, right? From day one only, I have explained this thing. There is no program, right? There is no startup class. There is no web config file. There is no global data access class file, right? Everything you need to put inside the program class. Why you are asking this question now? I even don't know. What is the meaning of this question?
Uh,
As I already told this thing many times, right? Only program class is available where whatever configuration you require, you need to do. No other classes. Means that discussion doesn't make any sense anymore, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, means right. Discussing those things doesn't make any sense. There is no startup class. There is no right. What I can say, global data access class. Right, nothing. Anything you want to configure, you have to configure within the program class only. Right, from day one, I have already provided that there is no startup class, only program class in .NET 8. Clear, guys? If you have any query, you can ask, right? And don't ask this thing, right? So, which is going to be waste of time for others, right? So, any question, if you are not understanding anything, right, you can ask. If you understand the concept, that's fine. Clear, guys?
Yes, Pranay.
Right. So, this is all about, right, your middleware component. See, all about means this is the introduction, right? So, we are only discussing the introduction part. Real-time use cases, one by one, as we progress, right, we are going to discuss, right? Right. Why I'm not giving any real-time scenario and example, all this thing? Because, right, many peoples are here who are completely new to ASP.NET Core. So for them, right, I have prepared the syllabus, right? Definitely, you guys might be feel something, right, boring, right? These are the very basic concept why we are taking more time, but makes sense, right? But as we progress, right, you will get more and more real-time exposure. Clear, guys? What is middleware components? How to register middleware component? What are the different ways to register middleware component? What is a terminal middleware component? What is the difference between use and run extension method? Is that clear? How the middleware components are going to be registered? What is the right proper sequence of registering the middleware components? Clear, guys? So ASP, so the key point is that ASP.NET Core request processing pipeline is consist of a sequence of middleware components that will be called one after another. Each middleware component can perform some operation before and after invoking the next middleware component using the next method. A middleware component can also decide not to call the next middleware component, which is called short-circuiting the request pipeline. This is also called as a terminal middleware component. The middleware component in ASP.NET Core has access to both incoming request and outgoing response. Clear? The most important point that you need to remember is that order in which the middleware components are added in the main method of the program class defines the order in which these middleware components will be invoked on request and the reverse order for the response. So the order is critical for defining the application security, performance, and functionality. This is the objectives. Clear? Clear, or anyone having any question? Clear, guys?
Clear,
Yes,
sir.
Pranay.
Yes. Anyone having any question related to previous session? Also, right, if anyone having any question, they can ask.
Sir, in this last middleware component, you wrote that it's a terminal, this one, terminal middleware component run, right, sir?
Yes.
Then,
Yes.
then how can go this middleware to outgoing response and middleware one outgoing response?
See, what do you mean by terminal? So I have also
I
written this
mean,
statement. What do you mean by terminal?
yes, sir.
Cannot call the next component, but that doesn't
Okay,
mean it will return back to the previous middleware component. It will not go to the
okay,
next
okay.
middleware component. From here only, the
You,
reverse processing will
it,
be started.
okay, it means it will go next, but we cannot call next middleware, right?
So it
Like
will not go to the next. Say see, you are completely right. Your understanding is wrong. So here, right? For example, if I have written this statement here, so if I have
yes,
written this statement here, so it will not call this means right from this line number, right? This middleware component, they cannot call this middleware component. For
okay,
example, right? If you just tell me if I'm calling one method, right? From method A, if I'm calling method B, if method B execution completed, it will come back to method A or not?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
So similarly, if this middleware, right, for example, let's put this statement outside. So if this middleware, calling this middleware, if this middleware execution completed, then to which middleware it will come back?
Right.
You are getting my point? Okay, let me
Yes.
simplify
Yes.
this, right? So let me simplify this more, right? For example, right? So suppose I'm having, right, static, right? Static void, right, method one. Right? So this is my method one, method two, and method three. So this middleware means they are also one method. So this is method one, method two, and in method three. So here I have written some statement, right? Here I have written some statement. I have written some statement here also. I have written some statement. Let me copy the statement here from here and from here. Right. So from this method, right, what I'm doing, I'm calling method two. And from method two, I'm calling method three. So now you just tell me. So when this statement is executed from line number 52, it will execute line number 53 or it will go to line number 56?
It will go 56.
56. From line number 56, once it execute 59, it will execute to 60 or it will go to 63?
Yes. 63.
63. So once this statement is executed, again it will come back to this place where this method 3 is being called or not.
Yes.
So and whatever the statements are remaining, they are going to be executed or not.
Yes. Yes. Got it.
So once method 2 executed, again it will come back to the place
Then
from where method 2 is being called,
yes.
and
Yes.
whatever statement are remaining, they are going to be executed. The same concept is here. Once this
Yes.
run
Got
method
it.
execution completed, it will come back to this place because from here it is calling and the remaining
Yes.
statement are going to be executed. Clear?
Yes. Got it. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Right? Yeah. So tomorrow what we are going to discuss, right? We are going to discuss what is that www root folder, or you can say web root folder, and one of the built-in, right, few, right, built-in middleware components we are going to discuss, like the static files middleware component, developer exception page middleware component, right? So you can see some exception handler is there, static files is there. One by one we are going to discuss. So few middleware components we are going to discuss in tomorrow's session. Clear? Anyone having any more question, guys?
So that C# tutorial is available in our Telegram group. Where it is available?
So did you join for the first time today?
No, no.
You are attending the session from when? Hari Krishna, right? Who is asking that question, right? Guys, please, right? So who is that guy asking, right, where the session will be available? Hari Krishna or Sumit? Who is?
Hari
Hari
Krishna,
Krishna,
sir.
right? So you are attending the session from day one or today is your first class?
From day one.
Day one. So, right, you have not yet joined the Telegram group?
I have only in the evening Telegram group.
So in the evening Telegram group, I am providing all the previous recorded session. You have not checked, read them yet?
No, that C#. You mentioned like the C#
No, no,
class and all.
it's not
That
C
what
sharp, right? So in the evening Telegram group, so in this Telegram group, you are joining or not? Let me check.
yes, is in this group.
So you have access. Then why you are asking this question? So in this Telegram group on a daily basis, I am providing the recorded session and documents. You have not yet checked this thing?
Yes, sir. That I am not
Yes,
asking
sir.
about the
He is asking
.NET
about
Core.
C Sharp, sir.
Array?
I'm asking about the C Sharp. C Sharp.
So I have already given access to C sub sessions, right? Whoever completed, right, the full payment, right? Those guys who are asking, I'm already giving, right? Anyone here who have already given access to the C sharp Telegram group?
Yes, sir. I have
Yes,
access.
I have access to.
Yes, sir, I have access.
Right? So those who have all right pinged me, those who have made the full payment, I have already given access to the C Sharp Telegram group. Right? So if you have not yet joined
Okay,
the C
okay.
Sharp Telegram group, ping me right in Telegram and I will add you into the C Sharp Telegram. Right? So there you
That
will
what I
learn.
asked. Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Right? So I thought you are talking about this today's recording session. That is the reason why I got
No,
confused.
no, no.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, fine, sir.
Right? And just to take the benefit, right? Whatever sessions I have provided in the session, just to go ahead and watch those sessions. Those are very, very, very helpful concepts. Without C sharp, right? Nothing is going to be there. Clear, guys? And guys, remember, if you guys are still having some doubt, right? This is the introduction. And this concept, right, we are going to discuss, right, in depth again, right, in MVC application as well as in Web API application. And I hope at time you will get more clarity, right? And even I can also believe, right, the basic concept doesn't make any sense, right? Until and unless, right, we have not discussed those concepts using real-time scenarios. And definitely, I'm going to discuss many real-time applications, right? Right, and you will get right under you will understand this concept right in detail, right? At that time, right, you will get more clarity, right? So if you want to see, right, what kind of right, so what I can see. This is minimal API, right? So minimal API, I have told you, right, how to create a project using minimal API. So I'm going to show you, right? Map, get, map, post, map, put, map, delete, right? All these things are there, right? In the program.cs class file, how you are going to create, use this method, right? Map, get, map, post, map, put, map, delete, right? All these things are there, right? How you can implement dependency injection, right? All these things are there. For example, if you want to see JWT, right? So if you want to see how the JWT is going to work, right? So this is how we are going to work, right? Suppose let me go you take. See, here we are creating some kind of services, right? Here we are going to use, see, you can see, here we are using HTTPS redirection, we are using authentication, we are using authorization, right? So all these things we are going to discuss. Clear? So all these things, right? So whatever, right, you can see in the app settings.json file, we are going to store some JWT related settings, how to create the API, consume the services, right? All these things I'm going to discuss. Right? But you just need to be patient, right? Everything, right? Whatever I have provided, everything I'm going to discuss. Clear? And this is going to be completely right real time. Right? So real time means you can say SSO authentication, right? How you are going to implement SSO in your application, right? All these things we are going to discuss. What are the packages, additional packages you need to, how to create the DB context object, how to configure the, see, in this case, you can see connection settings is there in the app settings, logging information is there, JWT information is there, right? How to configure the services, right? Here you can see I'm configuring the services, then I'm going to use, right, some kind of app, right, environment. So based on the environment, if the development environment, then I'm going to enable Swagger. If other than development, Swagger UI is not going to be visible to the client. HTTPS redirection, authentication, authorization, map controllers, right? So this is the endpoint, right, routing. This is the endpoint routing middleware component, right? All these things we are going to discuss. right? So whatever list I have provided, everything I'm going to cover. Anyone having any more question, guys?
Yeah, actually in CSR Telegram group, I could not find dependency injection and mediator pattern document. So if you have, can
Document,
you
right?
put that?
See, document, if you are not finding there, just check my website, right? Because those are old videos and old documents, right? And coming to dependency injection design pattern, I'm going to discuss that in a ASP.NET core session.
Because I generally take printout and while coming back from office in the cab, I used to read
Right?
those things. That is why
That is
I
what
am
I'm saying.
asking.
Na? Those videos are very long videos, right? So long
Mm,
videos in the sense, right? Some of the document even, right? Whichever machine I have used at that time, that machine I have already lost. Right? So some of the
okay.
documents, if you are not finding, just go to my website and you will get the documents,
Okay.
right? And coming to
Yeah.
this dependency injection, right? That what I'm going to discuss in ASP.NET Core because, right, that is dependency injection is one of the important design pattern. Right, factory is one of the important design pattern, right? Repository pattern, singleton design pattern, right? Some of the important design pattern that what we are going to learn here.
Okay. Okay. Fine.
And sir, do you have any book like have you written any book
No,
with
no.
this?
No. See, why I'm saying,
Actually,
because
it's
right, every day I'm going to update the documents. Right. For example, let me give you a clarity. Right. For example, for my current batch, right, suppose this is what I have discussed in logging, right, in my previous batch. Right. So this is what I have discussed in my previous batch. In the current morning batch, right, whatever I'm going to discuss, right, in let's open the Serilog. Right. So how to install this thing and whatever I'm discussing in the current batch, right, that logging and Serilog concept is completely different. So I'm going to add many more concept, right? For example, asynchronous logging, right? In my previous Serilog batch, I have not discussed asynchronous logging, but now I have introduced that asynchronous logging. Structure logging is that, centralized logging configuration is that, asynchronous logging is not there. But now I have also introduced that one also, right? What do you mean by asynchronous logging? The explanation, the example, right? Whatever I have provided here, the example, the example what I have provided in my previous batch is going to be different one. So this example is going to be better than the previous right example what I provided in my previous sessions, right? So even
okay.
right, few guys are also attending this batch who have also completed, right, who have also attended my previous batch, right? They can also find the difference, right? So every time, right, whatever I'm going to discuss, it is going to be a different, right? Not completely different, but few enhancement must be there, either in terms of explanation, either in terms of examples, or either in terms of adding few new more concepts, advanced concept. That is what I'm providing, right? So this is very, very
Okay.
important, right? For example, right, you can see currently what I'm saying. So this is the things that what we need to understand, how to remove old text file. For example, you are storing the log file in a folder, and that, for example, per day it is generating 1 GB of log data. And your right server size is there, right? Some bandwidth there in the D drive or E drive. You are storing the log file. That bandwidth is that you can store maximum 50 or 60 GB of data, right? Then how you can make sure, right? Right? Please keep the last 30 days or last 30 log file. Please remove the rest of the log file. I mean, delete those things. How you can do this? For example, you are storing the log file into a into a text file. And right, as you know, if the text file size is some KB, that's fine. Once the size of that text file is increased, right, again and again, and when the size is more than, right, 10, right, more than 500 MB, 600 MB, right, then that performing operation on that file is also going to be time consuming. So what is your requirement? So my requirement is that once the file reached 100 MB, please create a new file. So how you can implement this thing? That is what I'm going to discuss, right? For example, asynchronous logging, right? So you have to remember, if I'm going to store the data into a database or into an text file, so it is going to be a CPU bound operation or IO bound operation. Guys, tell me, if I'm storing the data into a text file, or into a database, it is going to be a CPU bound operation or IO bound operation.
CPU.
Yes, you are absolutely wrong. So how it is CPU? So you just tell me.
So it
IO
is
means what?
consuming
Whenever
memory.
So whenever you are communicating from your system to a different system, this is IO bound operations. Within the system, it is a CPU. Suppose I am executing a big for loop, that is CPU bound operation. But
Yeah,
if I
yeah.
am communicating with some additional database, that database means what? If you are going from your application to a different application, right? So that text file is a different application. Database is a different application. Whatever application you develop, that is a different. So whenever the differentiation is there, that is a IO bound right operation. And for IO bound operation, it is mandatory to use asynchronous programming. So whenever I am writing something into the database for the logging purpose or something into the text file for the logging purpose, that operation should and must be asynchronous. And the reason is we do not want our main thread to be blocked, right? While the operation is going on. So we need to release that thread. So for that purpose, we need to use asynchronous programming. So how to use asynchronous programming with the Serilog, with nlog, right? All these things I'm going to cover. So this is what I have not covered, right, in my previous session, but this is what I'm going to cover, right? Right. I mean, in the morning session I'm covering. So this is what I'm going to discuss tomorrow, right? So every time, right, every session, right, I'm going to provide a different set of documents, right? And you will see the differentiation. Clear? And whatever the C# sessions I have taken, these are old sessions because from the last 2 years, I have not taken any new batch for the C#. I'm planning to take a new batch, but I have not yet. I don't have that much time to take at a new C# batch. But yes, whatever I have provided, you will not find any right difficulty, and I hope you will enjoy the sessions. Clear, guys? Anyone having any more question?
No.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.